Around the world, artists are using digital technology to speak their mind. These artists show us that a physical studio is not needed, using the virtual world to question the reality we live in. As part of Power Play, an exhibition championing the African digital art scene, we will explore how these artists create. These are some of their desktops.
Hi, my name is Bolasito Adeyemi Ibitora. I am Nigerian, I'm an artist, and I would say that I work in time-based mediums, that is, I do performance, interactive displays, video works, and oftentimes at the center of what I do is this idea of interaction and play. If you look at some of my work, you'll see that a lot of the things that I do are sort of about collaboration, interaction, connectivity, and for me, I think that that's really important because I think that's always already happening between us. I just like to push upon the concept of getting involved and interacting with one another, because I think it is when we come together and kind of do things together that we can have a more collective or better idea of where things should be. Sort of a dream, a sort of a hope is maybe we can figure things out together. For me, I think about trying to find sites of collaboration, or what I like to call like interpolative sites, wherever I can. I generally will work with other artists, but often you'll find me working with community groups, people within the area that are local, living through whatever these issues are that I'm often investigating. What role does the artist play within communities? For me, my role is kind of like conversation facilitator, starting from one source material and building upon that based on conversations and play, and then eventually you develop a show. I'm really operating as the project facilitator, kind of guiding the conversations. At the end of the day, pulling everything that we pull together into a suggestion of a script that can then be worked upon worked on by the community. Yeah, I think generally artists are working as facilitators of conversations, really, and I think to suggest anything else is stepping out of a role of an artist and into maybe something that's maybe like an activist or something like that. I think for me, the art object or the thing that I'm trying to put forth is actually kind of like the affect of the piece. What you're feeling inside, this confusion, this sort of like discovery is what I'm trying to create. Actually, that's the piece. Picking up different mediums and playing, like you'll see in my performance pieces, I call them paintings. I feel like I'm painting. People are like, what? Like there's like all this color going on. Is this a life paint work? You'll see in my digital pieces, a lot of things that I'm doing, I'm playing with like sites, like the way that we see things, anti-order, anti-hierarchy, which is also part of this drive for me in putting work out there, because we're artists, but that's a job, that's a role that we're putting ourselves in. You don't have to be an artist to make art. My why is because I really want to suggest, I really want to question these ideas of, does it have to be ordered this way? Do we have to have things stacked on this way? This project is called Blue Part 2. There is a Part 2 because it is the second piece in a series that I have been doing, kind of trying to understand the phenomenon of perception. And this one is a VR piece. This actually ended up being the backdrop for the entirety of the VR piece. So what I was trying to do in this one was kind of play with this concept of history and also focus and how you tell stories. So what happened in the piece, of course, if you know VR quite well, it definitely depends where you're looking. So you might see something and something else might be going on behind you. I was interested in these sort of narratives, and I feel like what's interesting for me is that region, which is modern day, like Middle East, especially now, is really quite fraught. Of course, it's a lot of tension and conflict. These narratives that we understand are very much anchored to that region, but sort of displaced elsewhere. And one of those ways that happens, in my own understanding, is through religion and religious text. With the Achaemenid Empire, a lot of like the biggest religions of the world, Christianity, Muslim, Judaism, they're all anchored in this particular space. They started there. One of the things that stuck out to me as I was doing research for like some other concept, actually, I had been thinking about the Project Blue and what I wanted to do as far as narrative for a very long time. So I came across this piece and I thought it was just so interesting because there's like one element in like a particular religious text where they're talking about a battle that happened for a region. King Cretus, who was understood to be this kind of benevolent king, but he was kind of, a conqueror. He conquered this huge region, the biggest empire in the world to date. There's a passage in the text, and it was saying, like, the God of that particular text was saying, I sent this guy here to conquer these people, so then you guys would end up being kind of free, and just taking, like, the narrative of their own agenda and swapping it to be like, well, this is the story we're going to tell ourselves about what's really going on here. We're going to say that we're using this king as an agent. My overall goal of saving this religious group. I just felt like that had sort of been always a pattern in the way we tell stories, and in a kind of like, not necessarily like an erasure, but like a fixing or an editing. Can I put myself and tell the story as though I am that king? Can I even extend it further to say that I am that God? How much of me can I put in this story? And so that's what I was doing with Blue. I take a story that is relatively well known. A lot of my work is sort of anchored in a kind of story. I find storytelling as the most convenient and thorough way to sort of pass on a lot of ideas at the same time. That is why I sort of lean on the concept of storytelling. I want to talk about digital. I want to talk about perception. I want to talk about cone fatigue. I want to talk about the way the brain works in the same piece, because I think it's relevant, because it's always happening. That's why I lean on story. I think for me, what's interesting with like digital and virtual work, I think it leans on story too. I think that in its mode, you're getting like such a beautiful story. You're understanding things beyond just what it seems to be in the immediate. I want to do that all simultaneously, and I think digital art, digital mediums allows me to do that. I think that VR is interesting because it's time-based. It's also perspective-based. So these are elements, or the figures that I drew that were in the space battling with me. I put myself in the piece generally. I'm a performance artist, of course. So these are all little like moments, like little short moments that I again stitched together and put into the piece. So this is me dressed up as King Cretus, wearing blue. Blue because I was doing a color series, so red, blue, green. Blue just happened to be the second color. Also for this particular one, because I was interested in the region of, the Achaemenid Empire, I was interested in the reason for conquest at the time for them was lapis lazuli. So as you can see, that background that I showed you is featured here. You'll see some of those little figures that I showed you. There's the lapis lazuli, which also for me kind of looked like a world. Depending on where you look and what you're looking at, you're not going to know, what's happening or what has happened. So it all kind of depends. I use most of the Adobe suite. So to pull this all together, I used Photoshop, After Effects, I used Premiere, I used a little bit of Blender, but not much. I used Fuse. To rig the models, I used this, I think it's Mixamo. There's like an auto rigger, and it has a lot of animations as well. Yeah, so this is something that I did at Gasworks during my residency there. Since then, I've been sort of really interested in these models. I'm now working on a project where I'm interested in kind of going into historical places, reanimating what had happened in that place. So this is one of the bits that I shot like on location. Glossolalia is the phenomenon of apparently speaking an unknown language, especially in religious worship. To be so affected that you're sort of speaking a completely different language, that you're able to kind of step out of yourself and speak something really quite different. And I spoke about this idea of delirium and sort of what happens during that time. Although a bit attenuated, sure, I felt like it can be sort of extended to this idea of kind of seeing the light, speaking in tongues, having a religious moment. And so in Glossolalia, I'm playing on two different things. I'm playing on in church, in the Pentecostal church, losing your body, losing your mind, having like a kind of like just pouring out of self. And you start saying things, you don't know what you're saying, or like you're in a fever dream and you're sweating and you're pouring out yourself, and it's almost like the same gesture. So that's what you're going to see in both of the channels. You're going to start seeing some like forest, some plants. I used a lot of hibiscus. So it's still kind of doing this bricolage, devised, pulling together disparate things aesthetic. The piece I'm showing at Power Play is something that I made in 2016. And originally, it was just a response to what was going on with the migration crisis in Europe, the viability of passports, borders, which has also been an interest of mine, and the categorization in which we put people, and also what I was thinking of then as maybe like street level bureaucratic action from everyday citizens. As I mentioned, I work kind of compositely. So what I was doing was doing screen captures of Google Earth and putting myself in it as this sort of alien entity, conspiracy theorist thing covered in tinfoil, and coming in and, phoning home and letting everybody back home know this is the people and the things that I'm seeing. These are the places that are okay to go. And as I kind of come into these spaces, everything else sort of begins to get warped, digitalized. So you're seeing like all this invasion of me coming in. You're seeing more of like a digitalized aesthetic. So it's meant to be, for me, it was quite serial comic, of course. Places that were the most desired places to live and be. Of course, the most known cities, London is definitely on there. This home world that I created using the most desired spaces, fractured, disjointed, all over the place, not necessarily a sphere, not connected, not home. That's to suggest that it's not the full picture, right? And it's not necessarily something that is total or cohesive or right. This isn't a one-off story. This is a moment that is happening so many times, and it's only when we look at it collectively together, these several instances, that we can start to pin off like, okay, there's a narrative here. In our cultural understanding of gifts and the way that we share them, they're usually typically like jokes kind of things. When you're sharing on WhatsApp, you have this GIF, and that's how it's utilized generally. And I wanted that too. I wanted that, the typical reading of a GIF, and also a play on Western fear, the alien, the foreigner invading. It's like bullets. I trust that I can say what I want to say the way that I want to say it when I want to say it. I'm convenient and I follow my own directions. There's definitely like just the practical elements of being able to use yourself. The word that comes to mind is kind of like a safety in it, but it's not safe as in like I'm afraid of saying what I'm trying to say. I'm really wanting to talk about the perspective that I have, to consistently impose that this is my perspective. And I think for me that's important to always kind of suggest myself in it. I think a lot of the issues that I see that are going on is because there hasn't been enough of people insisting that, or we haven't insisted enough that a lot of these readings are unique to a certain group, a certain person. They're not the actual reality of the thing. That's one thing. I think that just as a philosophical rendering, I feel like it's important to suggest myself. The videos are stitched together. They're stacked on top of each other. There's so many different layers going on. I don't want to say that this is the reality. And I think with video particularly, there has already been such a history of what you see is the reality of the thing. Video capture has been used to convict. Video capture has been used to document. And in this instance, I want you to know that this is my fabrication. This is my story. So I want to suggest that other people imagine themselves in it too. I like that if you want to get into the work, if you want to get into some of the theory, it's there for you. But then if you're not necessarily wanting to get to that level and you want to just give it a surface reading, I like that if you just describe what is going on in my artwork, you get the message I'm trying to give across. I think for the future, of course, once we're allowed to travel again and moving back to Lagos, I'm going to be setting up of course, there's always the studio, but more of a digital virtual studio where people can come in and interact with digital art, see digital work pieces and things like that. So I'm having that in development. It's definitely a physical space. It's just that you'll be able to see digital arts in a way that you're not readily able to see that in Lagos. I'm just conceiving it as a studio, mostly my work, but I hope to be able to show other artists. I think the art world is actually a little bit slow in, picking up what's been going on with the digital world. We've been looking at tons of virtual galleries. Instagram is a virtual gallery. It's just that now we're starting to kind of utilize that in a different way, using VR or virtual reality and kind of expanding perspective, I guess, with this gallery notion. Am I interested in going into a virtual gallery? Yeah, I'm totally interested. It's definitely something I would do, something I have done. I read an article pretty recently about, people trying to get their collections appraised, and because of COVID, they have to do so remotely. People who are sending their pieces are only taking segmented photos. Sometimes they're not being honest about the damage of the artwork. This kind of evasive thing that the digital world will always allow you to do. This is why I'm saying that maybe we should stop thinking about this as a replacement and start thinking about, other questions of, escape, capture, limiting, editing, shifting perspectives, which were always there, but now in a way less attenuated, more straightforward and direct. Actually, I think it's really moral questions that we need to start developing and asking. I make art to ask questions, not answer.